Recently, I've come across several stories of collectors who have had their lives, and in particular, their marriages, ruined by their collectibles hobby. So, for example, there's a story of one guy who spent tens of thousands of dollars on collectibles behind his wife's back with the hope of starting a successful online business. Well, when that business failed, then all of a sudden their family was left with all this credit card debt. And when his wife found out about it, she felt betrayed because it was a form of financial infidelity. So just like someone who is having a traditional affair hides and lies about a certain part of their life, we can be guilty of a form of infidelity when we hide and lie about purchases that we've made. In a similar way, I've never been guilty of financial infidelity, but I'll tell you, I had a little bit of a tip with my wife last year when she was looking through our shared computer history and came across, not corn, that'd be a lot worse, didn't come across any corn, but she all of a sudden saw, man, Michael's been spending a lot of time hunting comics online, and it hadn't even crossed my mind that could have been a problem and made her feel betrayed in some sense, that I had spent so much time with another lover, my collectibles comics hobby. And so, of course, we talked that through and we got through it. Love my wife, so things are great. But all that just got me to thinking about what principles should guide collectors who are in a relationship with another person. So, for example, when it comes to how much I spend on comics, should I tell my wife about every one that I buy, or only when my spending crosses a certain threshold? Let's say, if I spend over $100 on a comic, or maybe $1,000 or $10,000 on a comic. Or should I say, hey, as long as I am taking care of the financial obligations that I've committed to, then it's none of my wife's business how I spend the rest of my money. Or when it comes to spending my time, do I need to tell my wife every time I'm logging on to start hunting computers, or that I go to the comic shop? Because I could sneak around to a comic shop just like I could another woman's house, right? I could tell my wife, I've got to stay late for work. Meanwhile, I'm making a little stop at the LCS on the way back home without her knowing. Do I need to tell her every time I'm stopping by that shop? Or is it only if I'm going to spend a full day at a comic convention? Or is it just, hey, as long as, again, I'm taking care of my obligations, then I can spend the rest of my time however I want. Tell me what you think. Now, I want to take a few minutes to talk about how my wife and I have navigated these waters. So, when we first got married, we put together a budget, and as part of that budget, we allotted each of ourselves a certain amount of money that we could spend just for fun on whatever we wanted, and we didn't have to tell each other about it. Obviously, as long as it's nothing like I'm buying cocaine, right? But as long as we're just having fun, enjoy your hobbies, spend this certain amount of money, don't need to tell anyone. Well, during COVID, when I first started getting back into collecting, there was no problem. I was buying some comics here and there, but mostly hunting dollar bins, so wasn't spending anything crazy. But all of a sudden, I came across a great deal on this book, Journey into Mystery number 85, and I showed this off in a recent video when I was describing this story. And I'm a huge fan of Loki. But even though this was a great deal, it was being offered at about a fourth of the fair market value. It definitely went beyond the fun spending budget that I had. And so at that point, I said, I've got to talk to my wife about this. I can't just make this big purchase without us being on the same page. And so I got together with her and I said, hey, this is a really once-in-a-lifetime deal. If we were to get into financial trouble, I shouldn't have any problem unloading this and getting back the money that I put into it. And so we talked it out, and my wife and I have a good relationship, and so she generally trusts me, and so we agreed that I could buy it. And I was like, great, probably never going to come across a deal like this again, so awesome to have this in my collection. Well, all of a sudden, a couple of months later, I came across another great deal on a book that once again exceeded my fund budget. And it's this one, Daredevil, number 168, and a 9.6, the first appearance of Elektra. And so I said, well, I got to go back to my wife and I've got to say, hey, I know it was only like 2 months ago. I said, can I buy this one book? Are you okay with it? But I'm here to tell you about this other book. And this was in the middle of COVID, and so we obviously had extra money coming in with the stimulus checks. We've got a bunch of kids, as some of you know. And so I know we had some discretionary spending. And and at this point, I realized, I'm getting much more serious into this hobby, and I'm seriously looking for big books, especially if I can find them at a quarter of FMV. And this was, again, at the boom, so it's not quite a quarter of FMV now, but I certainly would make my money back on it, and then some if I were ever to sell it. But I started realizing, this is becoming a much bigger deal in my life. And so we had a much longer, extended conversation where I went with her through some of the financials. And I had just started selling on eBay at that point, trying to flip and trying to get the hobby to fund itself. And so I talked about, I'm going to sell these books, and so that I can basically get the money to buy this, and we really won't have to dip into any of that stimulus money. And so we really went through a more extended conversation on the plan behind my comic book collecting and got on the same page. But then I also realized, it's kind of tedious and it's going to stress both of us out if every 2 months I've got to come to you and say, all right, well, there's another comic book. Because I realized at this point I was getting more serious, again, about selling on eBay and all this kind of stuff. And not everyone will be able to do this, and I'm not advising it, but my wife and I, we've been married for over 17 years now. I guess it's 14 or 15 at that point. And I am the sole wage earner and am in charge of just general, overseeing the finances and provision in our home. Obviously, we make big decisions together and all this kind of stuff. But I've built a lot of trust because we've never had a high income, but I've been able to do well with investing. I've been very blessed. And so we just had a conversation about, hey, do you trust me? Do you trust me to make wise decisions when it comes to purchasing comics and then selling them? Because if so, I think it's a lot less stressful if we have to just continually have these conversations. Because she has got tons of things that she's got to worry about, managing the home. We homeschool our kids. There's a lot of things that she is doing where it's been nice for her in general not to have to be concerned about the finances. And it's something that just really, I think, can be stressful to her. And so I didn't want to be stressful for her, and seriously wasn't just trying to hide purchases. And I wouldn't have done this unless we were really on the same page. But we agreed. She said, okay, I trust you. I know you're not going to do anything stupid with our money. You haven't in the past. And again, I'm not advising that, but that's just the journey that we've been on. But that was built, again, on over a decade worth of financial decisions that we've made together, and where she knows that she can put that trust into me. And really, we talked about during that time that each year I could make one big splurge. And but I can't. I haven't brought myself to being able to pull the trigger. I actually think I could spend more on comic books, and she would be fine with it. Like, for instance, my dream book is Fantastic Four #5, and that's a book that first appearance of Dr. Doom that I really want, and that I could buy that now, and it wouldn't be a massive impact on our family. It certainly wouldn't be cheap, which is why I haven't bought it yet. But even though we have the money, it's just so hard for me to pull the trigger. And so I don't know if if I'll ever get to that point, really. But it's awesome to know, because of the open communication we've had with each other, that I could if I wanted. But I started to think today, well, at what point, even though I've been given kind of this carte blanche permission to buy comics as I think is responsible, at what point still would I feel like, hey, I've got to have a real conversation with my wife, even though she says she trusts me? This book is just too big. And I think at this point in my life, like, if I came across a good deal on Amazing Fantasy 15, again, I don't think I could ever pull the trigger on this, but if I did, even a good deal on that is going to be at a range where I feel like, yeah, I can't pull the trigger unless I talk to my wife. And I think that'll keep me from ever buying one, because I don't think I could ever approach her with that. Never say never. If investments continue to do well in other categories of investing that I do, then it becomes less of a hit to us to buy that. Again, talking 10, 20 years down the road or something like that. So who knows? But I'm curious, for those of you who have a significant other, how have you navigated these waters, if at all? Or if you don't have a significant other, how do you think someone should navigate these waters? If you haven't subscribed to this channel, of course, I'd appreciate it if you do so now. Like, comment, thank you.